pet snake. There was a woman who bought a pet snake. It was a 12-foot-long Burmese python. She lived alone in a small house with her young son and kept the snake in a tank in the living room. The pet snake had a habit of escaping from its tank. After a while, the woman began to feel guilty about keeping such a large reptile in such a small, confined space. She would often take the snake out of its tank and allow it to roam freely about the house. Her little son loved the pet snake and often brought it out in the garden to play with it. One morning, the woman noticed that the pet snake had stopped eating. 3 days passed, and the snake still hadn't touched any of its food. The woman began to get worried that there was something wrong with the snake, so she picked up the phone and called the vet. "Is it normal for a snake to suddenly stop eating?" she asked. "It depends," said the vet. "In the wild, snakes often have to survive for long periods without food. Sometimes, they starve themselves in preparation for a big meal. Pet snakes can also get bored with what you're feeding them. They like a change of food now and then." The woman took the vet's advice and bought a new type of food for her pet, but the snake still refused to eat anything. Not long afterwards, the woman woke up in the middle of the night to find her pet snake lying in bed beside her. It was sleeping stretched out completely straight on the bed. Thinking this was a little strange, she picked it up and put it back in the tank. A few days later, her son was playing with the snake in the garden. The woman was washing dishes in the kitchen when she happened to glance out the window. Her son was lying down on the grass. The snake was lying next to him, stretched out and stiff as a board. The woman became convinced that the snake was dying. She immediately grabbed the phone to call the vet again. "My pet snake still isn't eating," she said. "I don't think there's anything to worry about," replied the vet. "Just keep an eye on it, and if it still isn't eating by the end of the month, bring it into my office." "There's something else," said the woman. "The other night, I found it lying in bed beside me. It was stretched out straight and totally rigid." "Oh no," said the vet with alarm. "You'll have to get rid of the snake as soon as possible. It will have to be put down." "Why?" "What's wrong with it?" asked the woman. "That's what snakes do when they're measuring you," he said. "Measuring me?" she asked. "It was sizing you up in order to eat you," he replied. The horrified woman turned and looked out the window just in time to see her little son's feet disappearing down the snake's throat. Mall. One evening, a woman was leaving a busy shopping center. Her car was parked in a dark area of the parking lot. Carrying bags full of groceries, she walked to her car and fumbled for her keys. Suddenly, she felt a searing pain in her ankle and she fell to the ground, writhing in agony. Just then, a man crawled out from under her car. He was clutching a bloody knife in his hand. He had cut her Achilles tendon, and she lay helpless on the ground, unable to walk. He stole her purse, her keys, and her car and then drove off, leaving the poor woman screaming in pain. In the late 1970s, this scary urban legend began to spread around America. Fears about the mall slasher were so acute that the police department had to set up a helpline. In the first week, they received hundreds of calls. Rumors began to spread that criminal gangs were attacking women by cutting their ankles to render them helpless and then cutting off one of their limbs. They said that in order to join the gang, the criminal had to show the leader a severed limb they had taken from a victim. However, the slasher under the car is just an urban myth. Police have never come across a case like this, and criminal gangs don't do this kind of thing. You don't have to worry about criminals lurking under your car, but you do need to be careful in mall parking lots, because there have been a few cases where women were abducted while they were getting into their cars. Also, there was a case in 2011 when a man in Virginia was arrested and sentenced to 7 years in prison. They called him the butt slasher. He would sneak up behind teenage girls or young women at busy malls and shopping centers and slash their butts with a knife before disappearing into the crowd. None of the attacks caused serious injuries, but some victims required medical attention and were left with permanent scars. So, when you're at the mall, you may need to watch your butt. Buckley family. This is the Buckley family. The children's names were Susan and John. As a Halloween joke, the kids in the neighborhood were going to get a dummy and pretend to chop its head off. The Buckley children thought it would be hilarious to actually kill their mother, so when the kids walked up the door, they got an axe and slaughtered her. Once everyone figured out what they had done, they called the police, but the kids were long gone by then. The only picture of them was this photo, taken by a trick-or-treater. The mother's body was found half-eaten. This photograph has been posted on various sites on the internet with the accompanying text, but it is not true. Here is the real story. This image is actually called Midwestern Mahricide, and it is the work of Eddie Allen from Haunted Memories. He retouches old photos and gives them a horrifying twist. In this case, he took a normal photo of two children and their mother and made it look like they had murdered her. If you look at the original photograph below, you will see that the mother's head is still on her shoulders and the daughter isn't holding an axe.